Chapter 11. Millie's sleep was far from ideal. She felt like she was screaming throughout her entire dream. Scenes played out in her mind. Of the massacre that happened that day, Omar's death, her journey to the ward, even some less than wonderful moments of her past. She didn't even remember waking up, which might have been the only plus of the night. She slowly woke from her slumber. Must have been decently early since the lights hadn't blared to life quite yet. As she got to her senses, she could feel something was grasping her hand. She froze and looked to her left. There was someone leaning over face down on her bunk, their hand laced with hers. It was Gorge, fast asleep while holding her hand. She must have actually been screaming in her sleep. Oh boy. The actions from the past couple of days had made Millie quite fond of Gorge. He reminded Millie of her father, a caring man who had comforted her, but also encouraged her when she tried new things. Millie must have been moving around too much because Gorge had stirred awake. He groaned as he rose his head, twisting it from side to side. He looked at Millie. "Looks like someone's awake," he whispered. Did I wake you during the night?" Millie asked nervously. "You and half the barracks," Gorge muttered. "I'm surprised you didn't wake up from any of that." "Any of what?" Millie quietly asked. "The screaming," Gorge replied. "You started to scream in the middle of the night, too. And yes, I did jump down in alarm to see what the hell was going on." Millie gave a small smile at that, although Gorge couldn't see it in this light. "You seem to have calmed down when I grasped your hand. And here we are now." "You do that for the others?" Millie asked. "In this place? Hell no." "I meant outside," Millie clarified. "Like, in your life." "My niece, I guess," Gorge stammered, seemingly catching himself. "You have a niece?" Millie asked, curiously hoping for more insight into Gorge's life. Yet he waved his hand dismissively, dashing her hopes. "Not important," Gorge said, and Millie just rolled her eyes. "I saw that one, Pinky." He yawned. "I'm going to try to get another nap in." He climbed back onto the top bunk. That nap didn't last long, as lights blared to life 10 minutes later. Gorge gave his standard mutter of curses as he rolled off the bunk and onto his feet. There were two new figures standing at the entrance of the barracks, Hyperic's guards, both dressed head to toe in armor, faces masked. "Ladies and gentlemen," one of the guards announced. "It's good to know Malcolm hasn't forgotten about us," Gorge growled, recognizing the voice. "Grab anything you hold of value," Malcolm continued. "You'll want it for the coming day. That's all I can say." No one made a fuss about it. Everyone had the idea that they couldn't do much to change the coming course of events. Millie looked at Gorge. He shrugged and sighed. "Do what the man says," Gorge said, a bit annoyed. "Bring literally anything you own. We don't know what we're walking into." Millie nodded and stuffed all of her extra clothes into her backpack. That was all she had. Gorge had his belongings in his green sack and they were good to go. They met up with Sly, Kristen, and Chase. Chase was holding Kristen's hand like a lost child. He was not looking any better. The boy still looked as though he was not all there, and he was much paler. Millie looked into Kristen's eyes, and she just shrugged. "I'll look after him." Sly had his pack in his saxophone case. He smiled at Millie. "Gotta take everything of value," he said cheerily. Sly led the way behind Malcolm and the other guard as they left the barracks, followed by his close group and the rest of what was left of the team. The morning had the same light snowfall that was commonplace here. As they walked, Millie saw that there was a line of 11 APCs waiting for them by the entrance. The vehicles had a round cockpit and a long cargo hold. These were the same vehicles that had transported her partway to the ward. She was not happy to see them again. "Really, best of luck, everyone," Malcolm said, "and I'm truly sorry." "You sure have a funny way of showing it," Gorge hissed sarcastically. Malcolm didn't respond. Gorge looked at Millie. "Stay close. We are not getting separated here." The guards led them to a booth. "Grab your gear from them." "Gear?" Sly questioned. "It's the gear that you use in the arena," Malcolm explained. "You'll get some rations and ammo to go with it. And don't draw your weapons. Don't make this more difficult than it has to be." More difficult. Right. Gorge replied skeptically. They formed a line in front of the booth, with Millie behind Gorge. It only took a few minutes for Gorge to be next. The man at the booth gave Gorge his standard gear. Gorge took it and stepped aside, waiting for Millie. She walked up to the booth man. B1? The man asked. Millie didn't know what he meant. The man nodded. Standard answer. He brought out the rifle she was familiar with. It was wrapped neatly in cloth, as well as a small box of ammo pellets, a pack of rations, and a combat knife. You're good to go, B1. Take your supplies and move to the transport. She did what she was told and met back with Gorge. She slung the rifle over her shoulder, attached the sheathed knife to her thigh, and stuffed the pack of rations into her backpack. Gorge and Millie reconvened with Sly, Kristen, and Chase. They made their way over to the transports. Malcolm walked up and cut them off. Before you make your way over there, there's only going to be 2 people per team per transport. That was a mouthful. Sly rose a brow, expecting a bit more. That's just how they have it set up. Thought you might want to pair up on your own terms beforehand. Gorge sighed. Thanks, Malcolm, he said quite genuinely. It's about the most I can do in this. Best of luck. And without another word, Malcolm walked off. Okay, I assume you and Millie want to be paired together? Sly asked Gorge. Both Gorge and Millie nodded. I'll be paired up with Chase, Kristen announced. Sly didn't seem too thrilled about that, but knew arguing on this matter was pointless. Chase didn't say anything or make any reaction to the news for that matter. Who the hell are you going to be paired up with? Gorge asked Sly. Sly shrugged in a carefree motion. I'm the team leader. Who wouldn't want to be paired up with me? And besides, I can always serenade them with my music. Both Gorge and Kristen rolled their eyes simultaneously at Sly's comment. But seriously, Sly continued, stay alive. And he left to go find a partner for the coming excursion. Gorge and Millie were separated from Kristen and Chase soon after as they lined up at different vehicles. There were arguments with the people who didn't get the message and the guards. One guard went down Millie's transport line, asking questions. The guard got to Gorge and Millie and asked, Both you from Team 6? Yes, sir, Gorge replied. The guard nodded. When you two enter the transport, just sit across from each other. Gorge nodded and the guard moved on. Gorge and Millie boarded their APC with 10 other people. They did what they were told and sat across from each other. The interior was dull with red light. There were 2 guards on either end of the interior. A couple minutes passed in silence, then the transport got moving. The ride was bumpy at times. The transport must have been going for 10 minutes before guards picked their first person. The woman they picked got her stuff and followed them without a fuss. The dull red light turned green, and a latch opened to the outside of the moving vehicle. The woman jumped out and the latch closed. The light went back to red. Gorge gritted his teeth. Clearly, he didn't like what was happening. Millie didn't know how she felt anymore. She definitely felt a sense of loss that Chase had been feeling, although not to that extreme. Another person went out the latch. She just had to take this one brutal step at a time. The next person up was Gorge. Oh, hold up, gentlemen, he said in a bit of a panic. They did just the opposite, picking him up and shoving him towards the latch. He stood at the opening, looked at Millie, and sighed. They then shoved Gorge out the opening without a word. Millie just slammed her eyes shut. She knew how she felt. She was scared. She didn't know how much distance the transport covered before she got a strong tap on the shoulder. She opened her eyes and saw the guard standing before her, motioning to the door. She got her things and followed him. She stood at the brink to the outside, the transport still buckling under her. She didn't need someone to push her to the inevitable. She jumped. She hit the snowy ground and rolled. She finally came to a stop with her back to the snow. The weather had gotten substantially worse. It was a blizzard. The tracks from the transport were already beginning to disappear on the trail. She patted herself down. She had all of her things and she felt fine. She tapped her wounded rib from a couple days ago. The fall hadn't bothered it, so maybe it was completely healed. If she survived today, she'd probably feel safe enough to remove the small pack from her rib. First things first, she had to find Gorge. She unslung and unwrapped her rifle. She stuffed the wrapping cloth in her backpack. She could barely zip it up with how full it was. She then loaded 2 balls into her rifle and started to backtrack the transport's journey. For the first time, Millie was really grateful for the boots Binks had recommended to her. The snow was deeper than it had ever been. The snow the transport hadn't compressed was up to her ankles on average. Sometimes she'd hit a deep spot that would go up and past her knees. The boots definitely helped keep her dry. "Aw, shit," someone called from Millie's left. It wasn't Gorge. "I have to kill a kid first? Come on." Millie froze. She looked to her left and saw a man approaching her. He probably had been hiding behind a pile of snow. He was wearing a green ski mask with a green shirt and dark green pants. He had a rifle slung over his shoulder and a knife drawn. "Look, kid, no need to worry. I'll make it quick and clean. No sense in ruining any of your gear. Trust me, the place you'll go to will be way better than this." The man lunged at her. She didn't have time to raise her rifle or do anything for that matter. The only thing Millie had going for her was that the man was clearly underestimating her. He pinned her back into the ground. He grabbed both of her arms and pinned them above her head with one hand. The other began to strangle her. Fear gripped her as she struggled against the man and consciousness. Her legs were still free, though. She lifted her left leg and kneed him twice in the groin. The second blow had a bit more force to it, and it did the trick. The man's grip loosened as he reared in pain. Millie pushed away from him, rose a leg to his chest, and kicked hard. She felt something in his chest give as he flew off of her. Millie was fast. She grabbed her rifle and fired. The ball struck and made a mess of the man's leg. She could hear him screaming in agony as she tried to catch her breath. The icy air stung her lungs, but she managed. She got to her feet and rose the rifle, preparing to fire the finishing shot, but she just couldn't. "Oh, just finish it already!" the man screamed. She couldn't. To just kill somebody. She couldn't just kill somebody. "Stupid kid!" The man kicked off the ground with his good leg and flew at her, knife in hand. 3 shots were fired. One hit the man's head, the other his left arm, the last his waist. Blood sprayed as the man flew to the side, crumpling in the snow, dead. Millie had fallen backwards in shock, but another figure was running towards her. She spun her barrel towards the figure and was about to shoot. The figure slammed the barrel into the snow with his foot and gave her a bear hug. Just like the last time Gorge hugged her, she was shaking uncontrollably. Her tears of fear and relief probably frozen behind her eyes. Okay. We're all good. We're all good. You good?" Gorge was breathing heavily. Millie nodded, still shaking. You did good, Millie. You did good." He released her from the hug. "There's some good cover back a bit. Let's try to get out of this storm." Millie nodded again. No argument there. They huddled under a small overhang of rock to get out of the storm, which at least solved the problem of the snow being blown into their faces. "Well, this is just great," Gorge growled. I couldn't do it," Millie croaked. Gorge rose a brow, concern on his face. "What? Couldn't do what?" "Couldn't finish that fight. Kill him." "Hey." Gorge rested his hands on her shoulder and looked her in the eyes. "That's a very tough bridge to cross. For you not to cross that bridge all willy-nilly," he gulped. "Well, I'm proud of you for that." "But my hesitation would have gotten me killed," Millie snapped, then winced at how she came off. "Sar," Gorge held up a hand to cut her off. "But you didn't. And you can't change what happened." "How'd you do it?" Millie asked. "Ending your first life, I mean." "It was a bit of a different situation," Gorge said. "I've been in my fair share of fights, but the first time I killed someone was in war. The day of the battle, I knew what was going to happen. It was a 60-meter shot. The split second before I took that shot, I thought of the people that were going to mourn for that man's life. Friends, family, and, in my mind, I'd apologize to them. I'm sorry. I took that killing shot, and that was that." "That was that," Millie muttered. "This is a whole lot different, Millie," Gorge said. "Do you have that thought every time you kill someone?" "Every single time." "Isn't that just to help your conscience?" she asked. "Absolutely," Gorge answered. "It helps keep me grounded to reality. It also makes sure that I never take for granted how valuable a life is." Millie nodded, taking in the words. "That's just my philosophy on it." It's how I keep my humanity in this world. If you start taking lives without a second thought or tinge of remorse, then you've lost that humanity, Millie. Then, in my mind, you're just quite frankly a monster. There was a long silence in the air. Just keep in mind what you're actually doing when you make that decision, Gorge finished. Millie nodded, digesting those words. She felt more grounded after hearing Gorge's story. Thanks, was all she could muster. Gorge nodded. Wise words from me don't happen often, Pinky. Millie cracked a smile at that, which, in turn, made Gorge smile a little. What now? Millie asked. Are we gonna try to find Sly and the others? Gorge stroked his chin, pondering the thought. The area is too huge to find anyone, particularly reliably. We need to find a landmark that anyone would recognize. Know of one in the area? Millie frowned, then answered, The ward? Bingo. Millie nodded, then asked another question on her mind. What's the point of this? Another test, Gorge replied. The goal is to thin the herd for their end goal. I don't know if they plan to go to the extreme of last man standing or anything, but our goal is to just survive. Take down anyone who wants to give us trouble along the way. Millie sighed nervously. No worries, Gorge continued. I'll do all the heavy lifting in the fights. Gorge gave her a reassuring grin, which did not reassure her in the slightest. The snowstorm had died down to a light snowfall that they were used to. Gorge and Millie ate some of the rations they were given and then set off. Any tracks from the transport were completely gone. Gorge said he had a decent sense of direction and led the way to where he believed the ward would be. Better than what Millie would have done, as she was completely lost. Either way, they had a long trek ahead of them. Even though they were going through the snowy terrain at a slow pace, it wasn't too long until they heard gunfire in the distance. Gorge advised that they try to keep their distance from the fighting, but Millie disagreed and pointed out that Sly, or any of the other people they knew, could be caught up in those battles and that they should help. They compromised with the decision to scout the conflicts from a distance. The first engagement they saw was nothing special. Just two two-man squads fighting each other, and Gorge and Millie passed by unnoticed. They were not so lucky for the second engagement they saw. They had approached this fight as it concluded, with two older men killing a lone younger man. The two fellas saw Millie and Gorge on top of the hill and immediately opened fire. As Gorge promised, he did most, as in all, of the heavy lifting during the short firefight. Gorge dispatched the two quickly and they moved on. They continued their journey for about half an hour without running into anyone, which made Gorge a bit tense. Millie heard a branch snap behind them. Gorge immediately pushed her to the side as he rolled in the opposite direction. He came out of the roll with his rifle raised, ready to fire. Whoa, hey, don't shoot. The new figure spattered. Millie recognized him as Connor, one of the twins that served with her and Sly in the arena. For fuck's sake, kid, Gorge howled. How about you just say something next time? I just did, Connor yelped. I mean before you piss me off. Don't you mean startle? Millie countered as she got up, wiping the snow off of her. Gorge let out a long, irritated sigh. Don't you usually have a brother with you? Ever find him? No, Connor stammered. You guys are the first people I found. In general? Gorge said with disbelief. Connor had a couple of tears in his pants and a gash through the left shoulder of his jacket. His face was a bit bruised, but that could have been from yesterday's activities. Connor still nodded in confirmation to Gorge's question, though. Well, you must be the luckiest son of a bitch on this mountain. I doubt that. I still haven't found Roger, Connor replied, a bit of panic creeping into his voice. How do you get so scraped up? Millie asked with curiosity. I mean, the fight didn't really go our way yesterday, Connor replied. That's an understatement, Gorge muttered. I think she meant your clothes, kid. Oh, Connor replied, looking down at his pants as if he had just noticed. I guess you can say that nature really isn't my forte. Took a bit of a stumble down a rocky hill. Gorge took a deep breath, then changed topics. Was Roger your second? Connor nodded. Yes, sir. A part of the same transport. One person dropped in between us. Haven't been able to find anyone. Millie frowned at Gorge as he continued to give a hard look at the man. We're helping him find Roger, right? Her question seemed to snap Gorge out of his pissed mood. He looked like he was about to say something, but seemed to catch himself. Then he said, "And you're with us. We're trying to find the ward." Connor nodded. "I've been trying to go in a large perimeter to see if I can find anyone from my transport. Care to join me?" Before Gorge could say anything, Millie chimed in, "Sure." She wasn't too fond of how Gorge was treating Connor. The man was just trying to search for his brother and clearly needed some help. And besides, Millie was starting to get a sinking suspicion that they weren't going quite the right way to the ward. Connor smiled and pointed in a direction. "This way." Before Connor could make too much progress, Gorge came up behind the man and put a hand on his shoulder. Connor almost jumped out of his skin in surprise. "Easy, kid," Gorge said calmly. "I'll take point." Connor didn't argue as they continued their journey with Gorge in the lead. As they walked, Millie tried to make some small talk with Connor. Connor seemed to loosen up slightly, answering simple questions like how he was doing and such. Gorge remained silent, focusing on the path ahead and the sounds around them, which were little and far between. Gorge held up a hand a bit later. "So, this is what you meant by not seeing anyone?" Connor nodded. "Yes, sir." Millie frowned. "What's wrong?" "This is beyond the luck of the draw," Gorge muttered. "We should turn back." What? Why?" Connor stammered, his nervousness coming back. "I don't like this. The quietness. The slopes getting steeper. Any one of these hills could be an easy ambush." "Or a hiding spot," Connor countered. "It's an easy, defendable position. Roger would definitely be in a spot like this. We have to keep going." "Connor's right. We can't just leave Roger," Millie said. "They helped Sly and I in the arena. I just want to return the favor." Connor smiled at Millie, although there did seem to be a bit of sadness to it. Gorge gave a heavy sigh, but gave in. "Fine." They continued until they found themselves entering an enclosed area with steep snow walls around them. A bowl of sorts. "Just bloody great," Gorge announced. Millie looked around, taking in the scenery, until she saw movement to her right, up on top of a wall. A group had appeared. They dropped something down. A body? There was no time for Millie to call anything out. As soon as the body dangled from its neck, a shot was fired. The noise pounded Millie's ears as she looked for the source. She then turned to Connor and Gorge. Gorge was on the ground, looking up at the sky. He laid in the blood-soaked snow. Connor had a small, sawed-off shotgun out, barrel smoking. "Gorge!" Millie screamed. She sprinted to Gorge, ignoring Connor and the danger from the right. Connor turned, also ignoring Millie, and looked up to the right side of the bowl. He was about to say something, but what was hanging from the ice caught his breath. His face turned an even whiter shade. He turned to Millie and the fallen Gorge. His face was stricken, and he just slowly started shaking his head. For whatever reason, he extended his hand towards them. Millie instantly scooched back, not having the slightest idea on what was going on. A split second later, a shot cracked off and the bullet hit Connor's shoulder. The momentum from the bullet spun him around as he landed in the snow, face convulsing in pain. One of the men up top screamed, "Opposite side, you idiots! Kill them all!" That's when the gunfire and the snapping lightning sound of sniper fire echoed throughout the bowl. No rounds hit Millie, or anywhere around her for that matter, so she ignored and drowned out the chaos around here. Gorge? It was bad. His stomach and lower chest were a mess. His eyes were barely opened and unresponsive. Was he dead? Gorge? She shook his shoulders a bit more violently than she had intended. She didn't know what to do. "Gorge!" she screamed. "He's breathing." She didn't know if she was just noticing it now, but it had quite the sporadic pattern to it. Maybe pattern wasn't the right word. His eyes moved, but barely opened any farther. "Gorge? Binky?" he stammered. "Yep, yeah," Millie replied, some false hope inflating within her. "Millie, please, I need to give you," he said as he reached down into his jacket. He pulled out a pink stuffed unicorn. It had one eye. Where the other eye should have been was just a yellow X. It also had 2 letters written on the body in red. GM. It had a light chain through a loop on its back. He placed it into Millie's hand. "My daughter." "Daughter?" Millie asked. "Give to my daughter if you see her. Keep it. Otherwise." Tears formed in Millie's eyes. Yeah, she croaked. Some of the tears fell to Gorge's face. A nice rain out here. He cracked a smile. Natalie. Gorge's hand slowly dropped from the unicorn in Millie's. Gorge Hoppy was gone. Millie sat there, just looking at Gorge, tears stinging in her eyes. A hand grasped her shoulder. She wasn't startled, even though she should be. Just kill me. She wiped the tears from her eyes and looked up at the newcomer. It was Binks. Oh, piss. He shook his head furiously. He snapped around with his rifle raised, popping off another round. She forgot. She was in the middle of a goddamn firefight. Shit, he spat. We need to move. He was out of breath, Millie realized. But she just couldn't move. Everything was happening so fast. Binks seemed to know this as well. Piss! He crouched down. You can at least get on, right? He was offering her a piggyback ride. She didn't know how to respond, but she was in auto drive now. She tucked the unicorn in her jacket and got on Binks' back. If her weight or her gear bothered him, he didn't show it. They went at a light jog, past Connor, who laid unmoving in the blood-soaked snow, and past two other bodies just 10 meters away from where she and Gorge had been. Millie didn't realize how close the enemy had gotten to them as she was with Gorge for his final moments. Final moments. Tears began to form in her eyes again. For the first time since her parents died, she began to truly cry.